Maya Johnson walked through the bustling airport terminal with the confidence of someone who had traveled this route countless times. At 28 years old, she had built her tech company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that employed over 300 people. Her black hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and she wore a tailored navy blazer that spoke of success without being flashy. The morning had started early with a board meeting in Chicago, and now she was heading back to her headquarters in Seattle. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her team, investors, and media outlets wanting interviews about her company's latest breakthrough in artificial intelligence software. Despite the chaos of her schedule, Maya maintained her calm demeanor as she made her way to Gate 15. Behind her, her assistant Sarah struggled to keep up while pulling 2 rolling suitcases. Sarah had been working with Maya for 3 years and still marveled at her boss's ability to handle pressure. Even now, with reporters calling about the major contract they had just signed with a Fortune 500 company, Maya seemed completely composed. "The car will be waiting when we land," Sarah said, slightly out of breath as they approached the gate. "And don't forget you have the presentation for the venture capital firm at 4 this afternoon." Maya nodded, her attention momentarily caught by a news report playing on one of the terminal televisions. The anchor was discussing the growing success of minority-owned businesses in the tech sector, and Maya's own company logo flashed on the screen. She had grown used to being in the spotlight, but it still felt surreal to see her life's work being discussed on national television. The gate area was crowded with travelers, most of them business people like herself, heading to various meetings and conferences. Maya had purchased a first-class ticket, as she always did for work travel. The extra space allowed her to continue working during the flight, and given her company's current valuation, the expense was easily justified. She found a quiet corner near the gate and opened her laptop to review the presentation she would be giving later that afternoon. The venture capital firm had expressed serious interest in funding her company's expansion into international markets, and this meeting could secure the additional $50 million she needed to make that vision a reality. As she worked, Maya noticed a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit pacing near the gate counter. He was speaking loudly into his phone, clearly agitated about something. His voice carried across the waiting area as he complained to whoever was on the other end of the call. "I don't care what the booking system says," the man was saying, his face red with frustration. "I need to be on that flight. I have a meeting with clients worth millions of dollars, and if I'm not there, heads will roll. Do you understand me?" Maya tried to ignore the commotion and focus on her work, but the man's voice kept getting louder. Other passengers were starting to stare, and some were moving away from the area to find quieter spots to wait for boarding. The man finally ended his phone call and stormed over to the gate counter, where 2 airline employees were trying to maintain professional smiles despite his aggressive behavior. Maya could hear fragments of the conversation as the man demanded to be upgraded to first class, claiming that his business was more important than anyone else's on the flight. "Sir, I understand your frustration," one of the gate agents said patiently, "but all of our first-class seats are occupied. I can put you on the standby list for an upgrade, but I cannot guarantee anything." The man slammed his hand on the counter, causing several nearby passengers to jump. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I demand to speak to your supervisor immediately." Maya shook her head slightly and returned her attention to her laptop. She had encountered people like this before, individuals who believed their perceived status entitled them to special treatment. In her experience, the loudest complainers were often those with the least actual influence or importance. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "Should we move to a different area? This guy seems like he's going to cause trouble." Before Maya could respond, the boarding announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to begin boarding Flight 247 to Seattle. We will start with our first-class passengers and those requiring special assistance." Maya closed her laptop and gathered her belongings. As she stood up, she noticed the angry man's eyes following her movements. There was something in his expression that made her uncomfortable, a look that she had unfortunately become familiar with over the years. She had experienced her share of discrimination in the business world, from investors who questioned her capabilities to competitors who assumed she was someone's assistant rather than the CEO. Maya had learned to handle these situations with grace and professionalism, but that didn't make them any less frustrating. As she approached the gate counter to board, Maya could feel the man's stare burning into her back. She presented her boarding pass to the gate agent with a polite smile, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling that was growing in her stomach. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson," the gate agent said warmly. "Have a wonderful flight." Maya walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, relieved to be away from the tension in the gate area. She had no idea that the angry man had heard the gate agent use her name, or that he was already formulating a plan that would soon turn her routine flight into something much more complicated. Behind her, other first-class passengers began boarding, including an elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary and a young doctor heading to a medical conference. The atmosphere should have been pleasant and relaxed, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. As she stepped onto the plane and was greeted by the flight attendants, Maya tried to push her concerns aside. She had important work to do during the flight, and she couldn't afford to be distracted by one rude passenger. Little did she know that her troubles were just beginning. Maya settled into seat 2A, a window seat in the first-class cabin. She placed her laptop bag in the overhead compartment and her purse under the seat in front of her, following the same routine she had perfected over hundreds of business flights. The seat was spacious and comfortable, with extra legroom and a small table that would be perfect for working during the 2.5-hour flight to Seattle. The flight attendant, a pleasant woman named Jennifer with kind eyes and a genuine smile, approached Maya's seat. "Can I get you something to drink before we take off, Ms. Johnson?" "Just water, please," Maya replied, pulling out her phone to send a quick message to her team back in Chicago. The meeting had gone better than expected, and she wanted to share the good news with her employees who had worked so hard to make the presentation possible. As Jennifer returned with her water, Maya noticed more passengers boarding the aircraft. The first-class cabin was filling up quickly with the usual mix of business travelers, frequent flyers, and a few families who had splurged for the extra comfort. The atmosphere was quiet and relaxed, exactly what Maya needed to prepare for her afternoon presentation. She opened her laptop and began reviewing the financial projections that would be the centerpiece of her pitch to the venture capital firm. The numbers were impressive, showing consistent growth over the past 3 years and projecting even stronger performance as they expanded into new markets. Maya felt confident about the presentation, but she wanted to rehearse her key points one more time. About 10 minutes into the boarding process, Maya heard a commotion coming from the coach section of the plane. Raised voices and what sounded like an argument echoed through the aircraft, causing several first-class passengers to look up from their phones and magazines with concerned expressions. The voices grew louder, and Maya recognized one of them as belonging to the angry man from the gate area. She couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but his tone was aggressive and demanding. Flight attendants hurried past her seat toward the back of the plane, their faces showing a mixture of professional calm and underlying concern. Maya tried to focus on her work, but the disruption was making it difficult to concentrate. Other passengers were whispering among themselves, trying to figure out what was happening. An elderly woman in the seat across the aisle looked nervous and kept glancing toward the coach section. After several minutes, the noise died down, and Maya assumed the situation had been resolved. Flight attendants returned to their normal duties, helping passengers with their luggage and preparing the cabin for departure. Maya was relieved when the peace and quiet returned, allowing her to get back to her presentation preparation. She was deep in thought, reviewing a particularly complex financial model, when she heard heavy footsteps approaching her section of the cabin. Maya looked up to see the angry man from the gate walking down the first-class aisle, his face still red with frustration. He was scanning the seat numbers as if looking for something specific. The man stopped directly next to Maya's row and pulled out a boarding pass from his jacket pocket. He studied it for a moment, then looked at Maya with an expression that made her immediately uncomfortable. There was something calculating and hostile in his eyes that sent alarm bells ringing in her head. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice artificially polite but with an underlying edge of aggression, "but I think you're in my seat." Maya felt her heart skip a beat, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with difficult people before, and she knew the importance of staying calm in confrontational situations. "I'm sorry, but this is seat 2A. This is definitely my assigned seat." The man stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space in a way that was clearly intentional and intimidating. "No, I think there's been some kind of mistake. This is my seat and I need you to move. Other passengers in the first-class cabin were beginning to notice the confrontation. Conversation stopped, and people turned their attention to what was unfolding in row 2. Maya could feel the weight of their stares, some sympathetic, others merely curious about the drama. Maya pulled out her boarding pass and held it up for the man to see. As you can see, this clearly shows seat 2A. There must be some confusion about your seat assignment. The man barely glanced at her boarding pass before shaking his head dismissively. I don't care what that piece of paper says. I was supposed to be in first class and this is where I belong. You need to move to coach where you belong. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. The implication was clear and ugly, and she felt the familiar sting of racial prejudice that she had hoped to leave behind in her successful career. But she had worked too hard and come too far to be intimidated by someone like this. Sir, I purchased this seat, and I have every right to be here, Maya said firmly, her voice carrying the authority she had developed as a CEO. I suggest you check with the flight attendants about your proper seat assignment. The man's face grew even redder, and his voice rose to a level that everyone in the cabin could hear clearly. Don't you dare tell me what to do. I know exactly where I'm supposed to sit. And it's not going to be in some cramped coach seat, because someone like you thinks she deserves to be up here. The racist undertone of his words was unmistakable now, and Maya felt anger rising in her chest. But she also knew that losing her temper would only make the situation worse. She had learned from years of experience in boardrooms full of men who underestimated her, that staying calm and professional was often the most effective response. Jennifer, the flight attendant who had served Maya her water, appeared at the man's side. She had clearly been summoned by other crew members who had witnessed the escalating confrontation. Her professional smile was strained, and Maya could see the tension in her posture. Sir, is there a problem here? Jennifer asked, her tone carefully neutral but firm. Yes, there's a problem, the man replied loudly. This woman is in my seat and she refuses to move. I demand that you remove her immediately and put her where she belongs. Jennifer looked at Maya apologetically before addressing the man again. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? The man fumbled in his pockets and pulled out a crumpled boarding pass. Jennifer examined it carefully, and Maya could see her expression change as she read the seat assignment. The flight attendant looked up at the man with a mixture of confusion and growing frustration. Sir, your boarding pass shows seat 15C, which is in the economy section of the aircraft. This passenger has the correct seat assignment for 2A. The man snatched his boarding pass back from Jennifer's hand, his face now purple with rage. That's impossible. I specifically requested first class. Someone must have made a mistake, and I'm not moving until this is sorted out. Maya could feel the eyes of every passenger in the first-class cabin watching the confrontation unfold. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, and she realized that this was about much more than a simple seating dispute. This man was determined to humiliate her, regardless of what the boarding passes clearly showed. The tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. But inside she was fighting a battle between anger and disappointment. She had faced discrimination before, but never so blatantly and publicly. The man standing over her seemed determined to create as much of a scene as possible. I'm not moving from this spot until she gets out of my seat, the man declared loudly, his voice carrying throughout the entire aircraft. I paid good money for first class, and I'm not going to be cheated out of what I deserve because of some affirmative action nonsense. The racist comment hung in the air like poison, and Maya felt the collective gasp from other passengers around her. An older businessman in seat 1B looked disgusted and shook his head in disapproval. A young mother with her teenage daughter whispered something angrily under her breath. Even the elderly couple celebrating their anniversary looked appalled by the man's behavior. Jennifer, the flight attendant, stepped between Maya and the aggressive passenger, her professional demeanor beginning to crack under the stress of the situation. Sir, I need you to lower your voice and return to your assigned seat immediately. You are disrupting other passengers and delaying our departure. I'm not going anywhere, the man shot back, crossing his arms and planting his feet more firmly in the aisle. This is exactly the kind of reverse discrimination that's destroying this country. People like her get handed everything on a silver platter while hard-working Americans get pushed aside. Maya had heard enough. She stood up slowly, her 5'6" frame still dwarfed by the man's height, but her presence commanding respect nonetheless. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear, carrying the authority she had earned through years of leading board meetings and investor presentations. "Sir, I earned my seat on this plane the same way you presumably earned yours, by purchasing a ticket. The difference is that I actually bought a first-class seat while you apparently did not. Your assumptions about me are not only wrong but deeply offensive." The man stepped closer to Maya, his face now inches from hers in a clear attempt at intimidation. "Don't lecture me, lady. I know exactly what's going on here. You probably got some kind of special deal or diversity discount that real passengers don't get access to." Maya felt her patience finally beginning to wear thin, but she maintained her composure. "I'm the CEO of Johnson Technologies. I paid full price for this seat, just like I pay for everything else in my life through hard work and determination." "CEO?" The man laughed mockingly, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Right, and I'm the President of the United States. You're probably someone's assistant pretending to be important." The insult stung, but Maya had faced similar doubts countless times throughout her career. She reached into her purse and pulled out one of her business cards, holding it out for the man to see. "Johnson Technologies, founded in 2019, current valuation of $200 million, and I built it from nothing." The man barely glanced at the card before swatting it away dismissively. "Anyone can print fake business cards. That doesn't prove anything except that you're a liar on top of everything else." By now, other flight attendants had gathered around the scene, including the head flight attendant, a stern-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia. She surveyed the situation with practiced eyes, clearly recognizing that this had escalated far beyond a simple seating dispute. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced in a voice that commanded attention, "we need to resolve this situation immediately so we can proceed with departure. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your assigned seat in row 15. The man turned his anger toward Patricia, his voice becoming even more aggressive. "I'm not moving until someone with actual authority fixes this mess. I want to speak to the captain, the gate supervisor, and whoever else is in charge around here." Patricia's expression hardened. "Sir, I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft, and I have the authority to remove disruptive passengers. If you don't comply with my instructions immediately, I will have security escort you off this plane." "You can't do that," the man shouted, his composure finally completely cracking. "I have rights. I have an important business meeting, and I'm not going to let some political correctness conspiracy ruin my travel plans." Maya watched the scene unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. She had built her company by staying calm under pressure and finding solutions to difficult problems. But this situation seemed to be spiraling beyond anyone's control. The man's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and she began to worry about the safety of everyone on the aircraft. Other passengers were starting to voice their opinions about the disruption. The businessman in 1B called out, "Just sit down and stop bothering everyone." The mother with the teenager added, "You're scaring my daughter with all this yelling." The man whirled around to face the other passengers, his anger now directed at everyone around him. "Mind your own business. This is between me and her." He pointed aggressively at Maya. "She doesn't belong here, and everyone knows it." Patricia had clearly reached the end of her patience. She pulled out a communication device and spoke into it quietly, but Maya could catch fragments of what she was saying. "Security to gate 15 immediately. Disruptive passenger. Possible removal required." The man heard the same words, and his behavior became even more desperate. "You can't call security on me. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get the seat I paid for." "This is discrimination against me." Maya felt a wave of irony wash over her. Here was a man accusing her of receiving special treatment, while simultaneously demanding special treatment for himself. He had shown his boarding pass clearly indicating a coach seat, yet he continued to insist that he belonged in first class. Jennifer approached Maya's seat again, speaking in a quiet, apologetic voice. "Ms. Johnson, I am so sorry about this situation. We are going to resolve it quickly, and I want to assure you that this behavior is completely unacceptable." Maya nodded, appreciating the flight attendant's professionalism. "Thank you. I just want to get to Seattle for my meeting." The man overheard the exchange and seized on it immediately. "Meeting? What kind of meeting could someone like you possibly have that's important enough for first class?" Maya had reached her limit. The kind of meeting where I'm presenting to investors who want to give my company $50 million for international expansion. The kind of meeting that creates jobs for hundreds of people. The kind of meeting that apparently threatens you so much that you feel the need to attack me personally. For the first time since the confrontation began, the man seemed momentarily stunned into silence. Maya's words had been delivered with such quiet confidence and authority that even he seemed to recognize that he might have misjudged the situation. But his moment of doubt didn't last long. "I don't believe a word of it," he said, though his voice lacked some of its earlier conviction. "This is all just an act to make me look bad." Patricia's communication device crackled to life, and Maya could hear the voice on the other end saying that security was on their way to the aircraft. The situation was about to escalate to an entirely new level. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the jet bridge as 3 airport security officers made their way onto the aircraft. Maya could feel the collective tension in the cabin, as passengers realized the situation had escalated to the point where law enforcement was involved. The first-class cabin, which had been a place of quiet luxury just 20 minutes earlier, now felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The lead security officer, a tall African-American man in his 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations, surveyed the scene with professional calm. His name tag read Officer Williams, and his presence immediately changed the dynamic in the cabin. The aggressive passenger who had been so confident and loud moments before suddenly seemed less sure of himself. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Williams asked, his voice steady and authoritative. Patricia, the head flight attendant, stepped forward to brief the security team. "We have a passenger who is refusing to take his assigned seat and is harassing another passenger. He's been asked multiple times to return to his proper seat in coach, but he's refusing to comply." The aggressive man immediately launched into his defense, his voice rising again as he sensed his position weakening. "Officer, this is all a misunderstanding. I'm being discriminated against because I'm a white male. They're trying to force me to sit in coach while giving preferential treatment to her." He pointed accusingly at Maya. Officer Williams looked at Maya, who remained seated and composed despite the chaos swirling around her. There was something in his expression that suggested he had seen this type of situation before, and he wasn't impressed by the man's claims of discrimination. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Officer Williams asked politely. Maya handed over her boarding pass without hesitation. Officer Williams examined it carefully, noting the seat assignment, her name, and the first-class designation. He then turned to the aggressive passenger with an expectant expression. "Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass as well." The man hesitated for a moment, clearly realizing that his boarding pass would not support his claims, but with 3 security officers watching him and dozens of passengers as witnesses, he had no choice but to comply. He reluctantly pulled out the crumpled boarding pass and handed it over. Officer Williams examined the second boarding pass with the same careful attention he had given to Maya's. The difference was immediately obvious. The man's ticket clearly showed seat 15C in the economy section, while Maya's showed 2A in first class. "Sir, according to your boarding pass, your assigned seat is 15C, which is in the coach section of this aircraft. This passenger," he gestured toward Maya, "has the correct boarding pass for seat 2A. What exactly is the dispute here?" The aggressive passenger's face grew red again as he realized his position was completely indefensible. But instead of backing down, he doubled down on his accusations. "I don't care what those boarding passes say. I was supposed to be in first class. Someone made a mistake, probably on purpose, to make room for her. This is exactly the kind of reverse discrimination that's ruining air travel." Officer Williams exchanged a look with his colleagues, and Maya could see the barely concealed frustration in their expressions. These were professionals who dealt with difficult people every day, but the man's blatant racism and entitlement were testing even their patience. "Sir, airline seating is determined by the tickets purchased, not by anyone's personal opinions about who deserves to sit where," Officer Williams said firmly. "Your boarding pass clearly shows a coach seat. If you wanted a first-class seat, you should have purchased a first-class ticket." "I tried to," the man protested loudly, "but they told me first class was full." Then mysteriously she gets a seat. How is that fair? Maya had remained quiet during most of the exchange, but she felt compelled to speak up. "I purchased my ticket 3 weeks ago through my company's travel department." There was no conspiracy, no special treatment, just advanced planning. The man turned his anger back toward Maya with renewed intensity. Of course you would say that. You people always have some story to explain why you get special privileges that the rest of us don't get. The racist comment hung in the air like a bomb, and Maya saw Officer Williams's expression harden significantly. The other passengers in the cabin were visibly uncomfortable, with several shaking their heads in disgust at the man's words. Sir, that language is completely inappropriate and unacceptable, Officer Williams said, his voice taking on a warning tone. I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. You're being removed from this aircraft. The man's face went from red to pale in an instant as he realized the implications of what was happening. You can't remove me. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get the seat I deserve. This is discrimination against me. Sir, you are being removed for disrupting the flight, harassing other passengers and refusing to comply with crew instructions, Officer Williams explained. These are violations of federal aviation regulations. You can either walk off this plane voluntarily, or we can escort you off. The choice is yours. The man looked around the cabin desperately as if hoping to find support from other passengers. Instead, he saw faces filled with disapproval, embarrassment, and in some cases, anger at his behavior. The elderly couple celebrating their anniversary looked mortified. The businessman in 1B was shaking his head in disgust. Even passengers in coach who could see into the first-class cabin were staring with expressions of disbelief. This is insane, the man shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. I'm being thrown off a plane because I asked for a seat upgrade. I'm being punished for being white in America. Officer Williams signaled to his colleagues, and they moved to flank the disruptive passenger. Sir, you're being removed because of your behavior, not your race. You've had multiple opportunities to take your assigned seat and behave appropriately, and you've chosen not to do so. Maya watched as the man was escorted off the aircraft, still protesting loudly about the supposed injustice of his treatment. As he passed her seat, he shot her one final look of pure hatred that made her glad she would never have to see him again. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. Passengers slowly began to resume their conversations, but the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense. Maya felt emotionally drained from the confrontation, but also relieved that it was finally over. Patricia approached Maya's seat with a look of sincere regret. Ms. Johnson, on behalf of the entire crew, I want to apologize for what you just experienced. That behavior was completely unacceptable, and I'm sorry you had to endure it. Maya smiled weakly, appreciating the flight attendant's concern. Thank you. I just hope we can get to Seattle on time. I have an important presentation this afternoon. We'll do everything we can to make up the time, Patricia assured her. And please know that we will be filing a report about this incident. That passenger will likely face serious consequences for his actions. As the aircraft finally prepared for departure, Maya tried to refocus on her presentation materials, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something about this incident would have consequences, far beyond just one delayed flight. She had no idea that within minutes her day was about to take an even more dramatic turn. Maya had just begun to feel the tension leaving her shoulders when the aircraft's intercom system crackled to life. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Captain Martinez, and his tone immediately caught everyone's attention. There was something serious and urgent in his words that made every passenger on the plane stop what they were doing and listen carefully. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I need to inform you that we are experiencing a mandatory delay and will not be departing at this time. All passengers must remain seated while we address a situation that has just come to our attention. Maya felt her heart sink as she realized that her afternoon presentation might be in jeopardy. She had built her schedule with some buffer time, but if this delay stretched too long, she might miss the most important meeting of her company's young history. The venture capital firm had been very specific about the timing, and rescheduling would mean waiting another month for the partners to be available again. Around her, other passengers were beginning to express their frustration. The businessman in seat 1B was already on his phone, presumably trying to adjust his own travel plans. The mother with her teenage daughter looked worried, checking her watch and whispering urgently about connecting flights they might miss. Patricia, the head flight attendant, moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, but Maya could see the concern in her expression. Something was clearly very wrong, and it wasn't just a routine mechanical issue or weather delay. The flight attendant stopped at Maya's row and leaned down to speak quietly. "Ms. Johnson, I need you to know that this delay is related to the incident that just occurred. The passenger who was removed from the aircraft has made some very serious allegations, and we need to investigate them before we can proceed." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of allegations?" Patricia glanced around to make sure other passengers couldn't overhear their conversation. "He's claiming that you threatened him physically, and that you're not actually who you say you are. He's also alleging that the airline is part of some kind of conspiracy to give you preferential treatment. The absurdity of the accusations would have been laughable if they weren't potentially so damaging." Maya had remained completely calm and professional throughout the entire confrontation, never raising her voice or making any threatening gestures. The idea that she had somehow been the aggressor in the situation was beyond ridiculous. "Those accusations are completely false," Maya said firmly. "I never threatened anyone, and I have multiple forms of identification that prove exactly who I am." "I believe you completely," Patricia replied quickly. "But unfortunately, airline protocol requires us to investigate any claims of passenger misconduct, no matter how obviously false they might be. Airport security and airline management are reviewing the situation right now." Maya felt a surge of anger that had nothing to do with the delay and everything to do with the injustice of the situation. Even after being removed from the aircraft for his own misconduct, the aggressive passenger was still finding ways to harass and inconvenience her. It was as if he couldn't bear the thought of her traveling to her important meeting in peace. Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom again, this time with an update that made Maya's stomach drop. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been informed by airport authorities that we will need to return to the gate for a security inspection. This is a precautionary measure, and we appreciate your patience as we work through this situation." The groans of frustration from passengers throughout the aircraft were audible as the plane began to taxi back toward the terminal. Maya pulled out her phone to check the time and felt her anxiety rising. If this delay stretched much longer, she would definitely miss her presentation, and months of preparation would be wasted. As the aircraft pulled up to the gate, Maya could see through her window that there were several official vehicles waiting on the tarmac. Airport security, airline management, and what appeared to be federal aviation officials were gathered near the jet bridge, all looking very serious and official. Patricia approached Maya's seat again, this time with a grave expression that made Maya's heart race. "Ms. Johnson, I'm afraid I need to ask you to gather your belongings and come with me. Airport security wants to speak with you about the incident." Maya felt the eyes of every passenger in the first-class cabin turning toward her, and she could hear whispers starting throughout the aircraft. She had gone from being the victim of harassment to being treated like a suspect in some kind of crime, and the injustice of it was almost overwhelming. "Am I being accused of something?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "Not exactly accused," Patricia replied carefully. "But they need to interview you about what happened and verify your identity and travel documents. It's standard procedure when allegations are made." Maya gathered her laptop bag and purse, her hands shaking slightly with a mixture of anger and disbelief. As she stood up, she noticed that several passengers were recording the scene with their phones, and she realized that this incident was about to become much more public than she had ever wanted. The walk down the aisle toward the exit felt like the longest journey of Maya's life. Every passenger she passed seemed to be staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy to suspicion. She held her head high, determined not to let the situation diminish her dignity, but inside she felt humiliated and frustrated beyond words. As Maya stepped off the aircraft and onto the jet bridge, she was immediately surrounded by airport security officers and airline officials. The scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie rather than her real life. Just an hour ago, she had been a successful CEO preparing for an important business presentation. Now she was being treated like a criminal suspect because of one man's racist delusions. Officer Williams, who had handled the removal of the aggressive passenger, approached Maya with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Johnson, I want you to know that this investigation is just a formality. Based on what I witnessed on the aircraft, I have serious doubts about the accusations that have been made against you." "Then why are we going through this charade?" Maya asked, her composure finally beginning to crack. I'm going to miss the most important meeting of my career because of lies told by a man who was removed for racist harassment. I understand your frustration, Officer Williams replied. But airline security protocols are very strict, and we have to follow them regardless of how we personally feel about the situation. The good news is that we should be able to resolve this quickly, since we have multiple witnesses and video footage of the incident. Maya nodded, trying to focus on the positive aspect of Officer Williams's words. If there was video footage of the confrontation, it would clearly show that she had been the victim, not the aggressor. But even if she was vindicated quickly, the delay might still cost her the presentation that could secure her company's future. As she was escorted toward the airport security office, Maya caught sight of the aggressive passenger being questioned by federal aviation officials near the gate. Even from a distance, she could see that he was still animated and agitated, gesturing wildly as he told his version of events. Maya realized that this was far from over, and that the next few hours would determine not just whether she made it to Seattle on time, but whether this incident would have lasting consequences for her reputation and her business. The airport security office was a sterile, windowless room with fluorescent lighting that cast harsh shadows on the white walls. Maya sat in a metal chair across from Agent Rebecca Torres, a federal aviation security investigator who had been called in to handle the case. On the table between them were Maya's identification documents, her business cards, and a tablet displaying security footage from the aircraft. Agent Torres had been professional but thorough in her questioning, and Maya could see that the investigator was beginning to piece together a very different picture of events than what the aggressive passenger had claimed. The security footage from the aircraft showed clearly that Maya had remained seated and calm throughout the entire confrontation, never making any threatening gestures or movements. Ms. Johnson, I've reviewed the footage from multiple angles, and I've also interviewed several witnesses from the aircraft, Agent Torres said, making notes in her file. Based on everything I've seen and heard, it appears that Mr. Henderson's accusations against you are completely unfounded. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was tempered by frustration at the time that had already been lost. Does this mean I can get back on my flight? I have a crucial presentation in Seattle that I cannot miss. Agent Torres glanced at her watch and then at her computer screen. I'm afraid that particular flight has already departed. However, I can tell you that Mr. Henderson is facing serious charges for filing false reports, disrupting air travel, and harassment. This investigation has actually worked in your favor in terms of documenting what really happened. Maya felt her heart sink as she realized that missing her original flight meant missing her presentation. The venture capital firm had been very clear that today was the only day the partners would be available for the next month, and this delay had effectively cost her company $50 million in potential funding. Agent Torres, you don't understand, Maya said, her voice tight with emotion. This wasn't just any business trip. I was presenting to investors who could fund my company's international expansion. This delay has just cost me the biggest opportunity of my career. The federal agent looked at Maya with genuine sympathy. I'm very sorry about that. Unfortunately, airline security protocols require us to investigate all reported incidents even when they're obviously false. Is there anything I can do to help you get to Seattle as quickly as possible? Before Maya could answer, there was a knock on the office door. Agent Torres called for whoever was outside to enter, and Maya was surprised to see a man in an expensive suit who she didn't recognize. He was tall, distinguished-looking, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Agent Torres, I'm David Chen, Senior Vice President of Operations for the airline, the man said, extending his hand. I've been following this situation and I wanted to speak with Ms. Johnson personally. David Chen turned to Maya with an expression that mixed professional concern with genuine embarrassment. Ms. Johnson, on behalf of the entire airline, I want to offer you our deepest apologies for what you experienced today. The behavior you endured was completely unacceptable, and we take full responsibility for not preventing this situation from escalating as far as it did. Maya studied the airline executive's face, trying to gauge whether this was genuine concern or simply corporate damage control. Mr. Chen, I appreciate your apology, but what I really need is to get to Seattle for my presentation. Every minute we spend talking is another minute closer to my meeting being completely impossible. David Chen pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. Ms. Johnson, I've been monitoring this situation since it began. and I took the liberty of doing some research on your company. Johnson Technologies is exactly the kind of innovative business that our airline wants to support." Maya was surprised by his response. She hadn't expected an airline executive to know anything about her company or care about her business needs beyond the immediate crisis at hand. "I've also taken the liberty of contacting the venture capital firm you were supposed to meet with today," David Chen continued, still working on his phone. "I explained the situation and the circumstances that caused your delay. They've agreed to hold a video conference with you from our executive conference room here at the airport." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. "They agreed to a video presentation?" "More than that," David Chen said with a slight smile. "When I explained what had happened and why you were delayed, they were so impressed by your professionalism under pressure that they asked if they could move the meeting up to accommodate your schedule. They're standing by to begin the presentation whenever you're ready." Agent Torres looked up from her paperwork with interest. "Ms. Johnson, you're free to go. We have everything we need for our investigation, and I want to personally thank you for your cooperation and patience during this process." Maya stood up quickly, her mind racing as she tried to process this unexpected turn of events. "Mr. Chen, why are you going to all this trouble for me? You barely know who I am." David Chen's expression grew more serious. "Ms. Johnson, what happened to you today was a direct result of racism and discrimination. As an airline, we have a responsibility to ensure that all of our passengers are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, or any other characteristic. We failed in that responsibility today." He paused, checking his phone again before continuing. "But beyond our corporate responsibility, I've been following your company's progress in the tech industry. Johnson Technologies represents exactly the kind of innovation and leadership that our country needs more of. If I can help ensure that your company gets the funding it deserves, then I'm honored to do so." Maya felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than frustration. After hours of dealing with harassment, false accusations, and bureaucratic delays, someone was finally treating her with the respect and support she deserved. "There's one more thing," David Chen said, his phone buzzing with what appeared to be an important message. "The incident on the aircraft was recorded by several passengers and has already begun circulating on social media. The airline's public relations team has prepared a statement supporting you and condemning the harassment you experienced." Maya's mind was spinning with the implications of everything that was happening. What had started as the worst day of her professional life was potentially turning into something much more positive, but she was still trying to catch up with all the rapid developments. "Mr. Chen, I don't know how to thank you for this," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank me by giving the presentation of your life," David Chen replied with a genuine smile. "Show those investors why Johnson Technologies deserves their support. And when your company expands internationally, I hope you'll remember which airline stood by you when it mattered most." Agent Torres gathered up her files and stood to shake hands with both Maya and David Chen. "Ms. Johnson, I want you to know that your complaint against Mr. Henderson will be thoroughly pursued. His behavior today was not just inappropriate, it was criminal. You should expect to hear from prosecutors in the next few days about pressing charges." As they walked toward the executive conference room where Maya would give her presentation, she reflected on the extraordinary turn of events. What had begun as a nightmare scenario of racism and harassment had somehow transformed into an opportunity to demonstrate her resilience and professionalism to the very investors she needed to impress. The executive conference room at the airport was unlike anything Maya had ever seen in her years of business travel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the runway where planes taxied in the afternoon sunlight, and the room was equipped with state-of-the-art video conferencing, technology that made the investors appear as if they were sitting right across the table from her. Maya had spent the last 30 minutes reviewing her presentation materials and composing herself after the morning's traumatic events. David Chen had provided her with coffee, a quiet space to prepare, and most importantly, the time she needed to shift from victim of harassment back into CEO mode. Now, as she looked at the faces of 3 venture capital partners on the high-definition screen, she felt her confidence returning. "Ms. Johnson," said Margaret Foster, the lead partner from the venture capital firm, "before we begin your presentation, I want you to know that we've been following the story of what happened to you today. Your grace under pressure and professionalism in the face of discrimination has actually reinforced our interest in working with you." Maya smiled, feeling genuinely moved by the support. "Thank you, Ms. Foster. I have to admit, this isn't how I expected to be giving this presentation, but I'm grateful for your flexibility. Sometimes the most important moments in business happen when we least expect them," replied James Liu, the second partner on the call. "Please proceed with your presentation whenever you're ready." Maya launched into her presentation with the same passion and precision that had built her company from a startup in her garage to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. She walked the investors through Johnson Technologies' revolutionary artificial intelligence software, demonstrated the market demand with concrete sales figures, and outlined her vision for international expansion. But what set this presentation apart was the additional context that the morning's events had provided. Maya found herself speaking not just about technology and market opportunities, but about resilience, leadership under pressure, and the importance of building companies that could overcome any obstacle. "The events of today have reminded me why representation matters in the technology industry," Maya said as she reached the conclusion of her formal presentation. "When people see successful minority-owned businesses, it challenges their preconceptions and opens doors for the next generation of entrepreneurs. That's not just good business, that's social progress." The investors exchanged glances, and Maya could see something in their expressions that went beyond mere financial interest. Margaret Foster leaned forward, her voice taking on a tone of conviction that Maya hadn't heard in previous investor meetings. "Ms. Johnson, we've seen hundreds of presentations over the years, but rarely have we witnessed such a compelling combination of business acumen, technological innovation, and personal character. Based on everything we've seen today, we're prepared to offer Johnson Technologies the full $50 million you're seeking." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. She had hoped for partial funding that might require giving up more equity than she wanted. But a full $50 million investment would allow her to maintain control of her company while expanding exactly as she had planned. "Furthermore," added James Liu, "we'd like to discuss an additional $25 million investment for a diversity and inclusion initiative that you would lead. We want to help you create a program that identifies and supports other minority entrepreneurs in the tech industry." Maya was speechless. What had started as the worst day of her professional life had somehow resulted in not just the funding she had sought, but an opportunity to make a broader impact on the industry she loved. The irony wasn't lost on her that experiencing discrimination had ultimately led to one of the biggest opportunities of her career. I don't know what to say," Maya managed, her voice thick with emotion. "This is beyond what I had dreamed possible." The third partner, Susan Chen, spoke up for the first time. "Ms. Johnson, talent and determination like yours deserve to be rewarded. But more than that, the way you handled yourself today shows us the kind of leader we want to partner with, someone who can turn adversity into opportunity." As the video call concluded with handshakes and promises to have contracts drafted within the week, Maya sat back in her chair feeling emotionally drained but triumphant. David Chen, who had been waiting outside the conference room, entered with a broad smile on his face. "I take it the presentation went well?" he asked, noting the expression of joy and disbelief on Maya's face. "Better than well," Maya replied, still trying to process everything that had happened. "They've offered full funding, plus additional investment for a diversity program. This is going to change everything for my company." David Chen's smile grew even wider. "That's fantastic news. And I have some good news of my own. The video of today's incident has gone viral on social media, but not in the way Mr. Henderson probably hoped. The public response has been overwhelmingly supportive of you and condemning of his behavior." Maya pulled out her phone and was amazed to see thousands of notifications across her social media accounts. Messages of support were pouring in from entrepreneurs, business leaders, and ordinary people who had been inspired by her story. Several major news outlets were requesting interviews, and her company's website had crashed from the sudden surge in traffic from people wanting to learn more about Johnson Technologies. "The most interesting development," David Chen continued, "is that we've received calls from dozens of other business leaders who want to partner with our airline, specifically because of how we supported you today. Sometimes doing the right thing turns out to be good business as well." Maya shook her head in amazement at the complete reversal of fortune she had experienced. "Mr. Chen, I can never fully express how grateful I am for your support today. You turned what could have been a career disaster into the biggest opportunity of my life. Ms. Johnson, I think you did that yourself, David Chen replied. I just provided the conference room. Your character, your preparation, and your professionalism under pressure. Those were the things that impressed the investors. As Maya gathered her belongings and prepared to head home to Seattle on the next flight, she reflected on the extraordinary lessons of the day. She had faced ugly discrimination and harassment, but she had also discovered allies in unexpected places and found that her own resilience was stronger than she had ever known. The aggressive passenger, who had tried to humiliate her, had instead inadvertently created a platform for her to demonstrate her character to exactly the people who mattered most for her company's future. His attempt to diminish her had ultimately elevated her to new heights. 3 months later, Johnson Technologies announced its successful expansion into European and Asian markets, creating over 500 new jobs and establishing Maya as one of the most prominent young CEOs in the technology industry. The diversity and inclusion program she had launched had already identified and funded 12 promising minority-owned startups. And David Chen had been right about one thing. Maya never forgot which airline had stood by her when it mattered most. Johnson Technologies became one of their most loyal corporate customers, generating millions of dollars in business travel revenue as the company grew into a global enterprise. The man who had tried to take her seat had ultimately given her something far more valuable. A story of triumph over adversity that would inspire her for the rest of her career, and a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities.